Mo, what's your full name?
Muhannad El-Barachi, which is really hard for most people to say.
So because Mo.
That's why everyone calls me Mo, because then they think it's Mohammed, they think it's Mohannad, it's Mehanamid. And I don't blame them. It's not an easy name to say, but Muhannad El-Barachi.
You were 7 when you moved to Canada?
Yeah, my dad was an infrastructure engineer in Egypt, and he worked on the High Dam, like this big power station in Egypt that is a hydroelectric plant. And back in the 80s, just the corruption was just nuts. It was too much, and he wanted to do things clean, and it was just impossible without bribing people, nonstop. So sheer serendipity, friend of a friend of a friend, immigration, came to Toronto to do a construction gig on his own while we were still in Egypt, and broke his leg. And while he was here, they're like, well, you're bedridden, you can't go home, so you may as well just apply for immigration. So he did. And then we got it. Somehow, I think, though, he didn't fill the paperwork right, so we ended up landing in Quebec, not in Ontario. So here's a 7-year-old Arabic kid being uprooted from his life, saying, welcome to this brand new world. Oh, and by the way, you're going to do it all in French. So that was my welcome into North America. It was...
You spoke English in Egypt?
Not even, like barely.
So you were learning 3 languages, or you were learning 2 languages on top of
Correct.
The Arabic?
Yeah, correct. Remember how we were talking about adversity before?
Yeah.
That's adversity, my friend.
Were either your parents entrepreneurs?
My dad, a little bit. He always tried to do his own thing, but always in the context of construction and infrastructure, it's a very limited industry. There's really a handful of projects at any point in time, and if you don't have the connections, then you're just not getting anywhere. And so he moved from a very corrupt system to one that wouldn't deal with you if you didn't speak French. That's basically it. And so it didn't work out for him in Quebec. He only stayed with us in Quebec for, I think, 2.5 years. And then he left and he went to Houston. And he ended up working in the oil projects over there. And then from there made his way to Abu Dhabi in like the early 90s. And then basically just stayed in the UAE ever since. And so my journey has been one of get uprooted when I'm 7, go to Montreal. I mean, I'm making it sound a lot worse than it was, but still. Go to Montreal when I'm 7. I'm there from 7 to 14. Then we're in the States for a bit. Then we go to Abu Dhabi for a couple of years. Then my sister, it's only her and I, she's older than me, went to university in Egypt, and she was living with my grandmother at the time. Then my grandmother passed away. We couldn't leave her alone in Egypt. So then my mom had to go down with her. And then I had the choice of staying in Abu Dhabi with my dad or going to Egypt with my mom. And I had really not sort of lived with my dad most of my life because he's always going around. So I decided to go to Egypt and finish my high school there. And so I don't think I stayed in the same school for more than 2 years or 3 years in a row from 7 till 18. And then I finished high school and I was sort of fed up of being dragged around everywhere. So I just packed my shit and went to Montreal.
Why Montreal?
It's what I knew. It's what I knew. I had obviously the residency and the passport, and now I spoke French. And look, I have a love-hate relationship with that city. I owe a lot of who I am to it today. It's become a very weird version of itself. I think there's so much beauty in that city that's being tarnished by just bad politics in general. But one of the things that they've done really well is they've made it so that education is actually really great. I went to a great school, and for the fees that I paid, I think the net ROI is very, very positive. Very positive.
What was it like? You mentioned uproot. Paint me a picture of being 7 and landing in Montreal. Like, what did everything look like, smell like, feel like, taste like?
I asked this question let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
What's your earliest childhood memory? That's an actual memory. That's not something that you saw in a picture. How old are you?
I remember something that was traumatic at 2. I pulled a mirror on myself and it crashed all over me when I was 2. I remember that vividly.
Okay. And then outside of the traumatic one?
Probably 5.
Right. My earliest childhood memory is from when I'm 8. So an entire year post having moved, and like an actual formed memory. I should probably go see someone about this and try and find out why. So I don't know that I could answer that. But what I do remember is when I finally sort of started morphing, I guess, a bit of an identity. It wasn't that it was all foreign to me, because I was very young when we moved there. I woke up not really knowing what I was. Am I Egyptian? Am I Canadian? Am I French? Am I English? I come from a very Muslim family. Now we're in a non-Muslim country where people do things differently. And so I sort of like came to age, if I can put it this way, in a very confused time for me, where I didn't have stability. And then a couple of years later, and I'm now 13 or 14, and then we move again. And now I'm being, shifted yet into another community with a completely different set of values and rules and languages. And this is like, you're talking Abu Dhabi in the early 90s. They had just made obscene amounts of money from oil. And now I'm thrust into a private school at the time with a bunch of kids who have no value for money. Their idea of having fun is going to buy a Range Rover on the weekend and trashing it. And so now I'm developing yet another identity. Then 2 years later, I moved to Egypt to finish my high school. And now, like Egypt has and always will be for me home. Like, that's just the way I think about it. And that is what actually cemented my identity. And I thank God till today that that's actually what happened, because in today's day and age, I value very much that I feel like I became a man in Egypt, that it cemented my identity of someone who is going to mean what he says, say what he means, walk the walk, talk the talk, all of it. And I think that the sense of, not to sound too disparaging to people who might get offended by this, but like the art of being a man has died, or is in fact dying. And that bothers me a lot, because I don't want my sons to grow up this way. I want them to have ethics and cores and values and to be strong and to care and to be a good contributing member to society. And that's no longer the case. Men are not men these days anymore. That bothers me a lot. So anyways, all this to say, those 3 years of high school in Egypt cemented my identity. And then when I went to university in Montreal, at least I now knew who I aspired to become. And then I had some grounding principles that allowed me to become the person that I am today.
What was the first time you exchanged time for money? What was your first entrepreneurial experience? If that was even, trading marbles with other kids for money in when you're 7, what was the first time that you earned?
It's really interesting. I never had an entrepreneurial drive growing up. I didn't have my mom and my sister, I think I told you this on the drive in, they both have PhDs, and not in like some whatever. Like my mom has a PhD in chemistry. She invented a way of producing plastic that's like 60% cheaper than the rest of the world. And then my sister has a PhD in electrical engineering and she's now the associate dean of computer science in a major university in Dubai. Like just very, very smart people. I graduated with a GPA of 2.54. Which, by the way, Concordia grades out of 4.3, not out of 4.0. So, like, I don't even think I made 50%. But, the realization for me was I saw this journey along the way of the corporate ladder everywhere. And those were the experiences that I saw with my parents, my mom and my dad, and certainly just the people surrounding them. And, when we lived in Abu Dhabi, that's what you did. You got a job, you waited for the promotion and the next thing and the next thing. And then, I saw my sister sort of like enter the corporate world, and then she got married and her husband was, very much all about getting the Microsoft certification and the Oracle certification. So you could just keep on going up and up. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's the way. And then I graduated, I did a degree in computer science with a minor in political science. And thank God for poli-sci, because that's what actually allowed me to graduate, because I sucked at computer science. I remember my first class was this class called Discrete Mathematics that has no numbers. It's all logic gates and stuff. And a horrible teacher, brilliant mathematician, couldn't talk to another human being. And my grade on my first assignment was 3%. I got 3% on my first, I'm like, did I just write my name right? But like, that was an omen for what was about to come. But anyways, pulling it back to your question, I just saw everybody working on climbing the ladder, and I thought that that's how it was going to be. And it wasn't until I got my first job at the university. And so the Concordia University had an IT department called IITS. And so I got a job there to do desktop support. So I was helping people with their screensavers and their antivirus and their email setups and all that. And then over the span of, I guess, a year and a half, which is how long I worked there for, I made my way all the way up to managing the entire server infrastructure of the university. Like, I was very good. I was very good with people. I was very good at my job. I was dedicated. I cared, you know? And then I realized that my boss, who had been there for 20 years, was making $90,000 a year. And this is, 2003, 2004. I'm like, oh shit. So now
it's 90,000 Canadian at 50% tax rate.
Yeah, right? And so I'm like, holy shit. So I basically have to wait 20 years, and the highest aspiration that I can have in this job is having his job. That sucks. And so I decided I wasn't going to do that. I didn't know that I wanted to start a business, but I knew I wasn't going to go and waste my time doing that. And so the first time that I guess I exchanged service for money is when I left the university and I started to be a freelance programmer. And initially I would just charge by the hour, and then I realized, no, wait a second, I can completely charge by the project. And then what do they care if I do it in an hour or in 10 hours, right? And that sort of started this whole process of, oh, wait, I actually have very transferable and sellable skills, and people are willing to pay me money for it. And I'm also very likable. So how do I bring these two things together? And then it just sort of devolved from there, or evolved, but probably devolved.
Okay, so let's unpack that. So now you are freelancing, and you're coming in as a for-hire programmer.
Yeah.
I thought you were bad at computer programming, you said.
Yeah, but
no one else was HTML coding in 2003?
No, I was actually a Perl programmer at the time, which it's like a dying or dead language. I don't know if anyone still uses that or not. But the thing about programming is you could still be a really shitty programmer, but as long as you know the basics, you can make your code work.
Yeah.
Right? But then, like, where you get in trouble is when your code needs to be used by tens of thousands of people, and like it needs to be optimized. Like, I was just never good at that. But I could make the thing work till today. Like, I'll still code till today, but I'll make it work. It's not going to be great, but I'll make it work.
It's interesting. Quick sidebar. So I think I mentioned on my other side, my cousin Tony helped him build that PHP shop in Montreal. And, I basically, they convinced me to come and work for them. I was about to start my own home remodeling company. I was out of the cruise business. And I kept saying no, and they kept saying, just fucking try it. And I said, I've never sold B2B. I've never sold tech. I've never sold services. I don't know what to do. Anyway, long story short, we were competing against India. So all I needed to do was frame the values of us being in the Eastern time zone.
Yeah.
And then I dug into education, so inexpensive here. Everyone here has a master's in this room. And we weren't getting traction. And then what happened was I asked the guys, what is a hot language that no one else is doing? And one guy goes, Ruby on Rails.
That's right.
And at that time, this is like 12 years ago, there's no Ruby programmers.
No.
And
very expensive, yeah.
I leveraged this guy, Luke, and I sold this guy. And that is what spun off. And where I was going with this was that this guy, so our first big contract was $250,000 US in 2009, and it was for Esri. This company was getting bought by Esri, and this guy had this genius idea, but was a shit coder. So we had $250,000 of Ruby on Rails code that had to be optimized.
It's crazy. I think what I'm about to say is mostly accurate, but it may not be factually 100% accurate. But I know Toby, who's the founder of Shopify. One of the reasons they actually became really big is because he really embraced Ruby on Rails. He loved it as a language. And so a lot of the people that he attracted early on were a lot of these Ruby guys and girls. And they were such a tight-knit community of really hardcore programmers that he ended up just with the best. So Shopify in the early days was very well known to be a Ruby shop. And that's why they just, like flocks of engineers just went there. And look at that product today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're now realizing that you have the opportunity to, sell services. How long were you freelance programming?
Yeah, I did it for about 3 years. And that was fun because you made quite a bit of money. But then I don't know how to describe it. You didn't feel any continuity because at the end of every project, you sort of just delivered it and it was done. It was like, here you go, here's the baby that I built for you, and then it's over, Then you start all over again. And so I joined a company out of Ottawa that was, they had the first version of, well, not the first version. If you remember Auto Trader, so a platform to help you sell cars, they had that, but for anything that wasn't a car. So if you want to buy a used dump truck or a used school bus or an aircraft maintenance vehicle, they sold that. But they had very low technical skill. Like the stuff they built was very juvenile. And so I started doing a freelance contract for them, and then slowly I got to know them very well. And I said, listen, you're onto something. There's something interesting here. They were managing like $2-3 million worth of inventory at any point in time. Like there was something there. And they actually found their niche specifically in building custom websites for motorcycle companies and truckers. And there's like a lot of them, but like what a niche to go after. And so I convinced them to let me rebuild their infrastructure well and better. And then we started expanding into a number of different things. So we built a warranty business for like when people were buying Vespas and bikes, they would fill out their warranty application online to them. We did a website builder tool, like an early Wix, where they could sort of drag and drop components and things of that nature. And but we wanted to do it on the cheap. And so I used that as an opportunity to gain a little bit of international experience. And I flew back to Egypt and I opened up a dev center there for them. And so I went, rented an apartment in Cairo, hired a bunch of local devs, because at the time, with the exchange rate, like you were getting incredible talent. The thing about Egypt that a lot of people don't know is education there is free. And so everybody's educated. Everybody, and there's this societal thing where if you're not an engineer or a doctor, you're a failure. So everybody is one of those things. And so you have incredible talent, incredible engineers that are, I don't want to say dirt cheap, but a lot cheaper than in North America. And so I went and hired half a dozen guys, and we just sat there and we coded the whole thing. And that was fun. But then it became very clear to me that those guys wanted to just build a lifestyle business. And they never wanted to grow it beyond the few million bucks that it was going to produce or whatever. And I was never really going to cut in and be in a meaningful enough way. And that was the beginning of me realizing, okay, I need to do something here that's beyond just me freelancing.
So what came next?
So what came next is is something that actually makes no sense at all. I actually got out of tech. I had spent a bunch of time in Egypt. My parents lived in Dubai still, or Abu Dhabi, and so I would, go back and forth. And my dad kept telling me, you need to come check it out here. You need to come check out the Middle East. There's a lot of money in Dubai. There's lots of stuff happening. And so I was like, okay. I went to Abu Dhabi and spent a little bit of time there. I attended a bunch of conferences. And I got hooked up with this guy, a much older guy, who had a commodities trading business. He was selling fertilizer and diesel, coffee and sugar. And I just got fascinated with this space. I was like, what is this shit? Like, you're selling containers. Basically, he would get a notice that there's a consignment of whatever about to hit sea. And it was this competition of which broker could get the best deal for this ship. And literally, you're trying to create these bidding wars on the minute with like people on the phone. It's like watching, movies of like the stock market back in the day of people like shouting. It was like that, but with a shipment of meat about to leave port. So I was like, I need to do this. I'm like, I don't know why. I have to do this. So I joined forces with this guy, and I got into the commodities trading business for a year in Dubai. And so we started selling whatever we could get our hands on. And in the beginning, I really didn't know what I was doing. And then slowly I started to build a network of people and would go to events and meet the buyers and the brokers. But the problem with this industry is it's 98% brokers and then 2% actual buyers and sellers. So you're learning how to cut through the bullshit And you're like, okay, now I know the questions to ask to actually tell whether you actually have product or not. Oh, I need to actually ask which banks you're dealing with to know if you can actually open up a performance bond or a letter of intent. And you learn so quickly with it, but it's like a drug. It's so addictive because every day it's like something new, and you're like, oh, I thought this guy was really big. He's really not, and he's actually borrowing money to make this thing happen. But I just found it really fascinating. Anyways, we ended up doing 2 really big trades. One trade of selling fertilizer from the Ukraine to Vietnam, and another one to selling sugar from Brazil to what I came later to learn was being funneled back to Iraq when they were going through their Iraq war and all this stuff. It was very messy stuff. But it was great because I ended up just building a lot of relationships with banks and like I knew how to speak the finance language and what performance bonds meant and letters of intent. And, I had people at JP Morgan and at Barclays and at what was then at the time Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns and so forth. So fast forward, the deal that I did with Vietnam to sell them fertilizer ended up being a deal with the government. And when you're doing transactions of this volume, and you're talking like it's a $500,000 deal, you're flying there. You're not going to do this over email, right? So I fly into Vietnam multiple times. I meet with the People's Committee of Quang Nam, which is in the center of the country, and that's who I'm doing a transaction with. And I'm 27 years old. They're like, who the hell is this kid who's like helping broker these things? And they're blown away. Everything that I do, the thing that I came to learn about the commodities business is actually not super hard. Like it's a lot of relationships and stuff, but most people just don't do their paperwork well. And so my first thing was like, I just took all the paperwork that needed to be done and I put it in a nice format. I put a cover page, made sure there were no spelling mistakes. I made sure it was translated into the local language of the country we were dealing with. The bills of lading were done properly. Everything was packaged well. If we were going to send something, I would send a PowerPoint presentation in advance. Like just simple, basic things that were just the details. And they're like, to them, they're like, wow, this guy knows what he's doing. This is great. So anyways, the commodities business, much like the stock trading business, is so high pressure and high intensity. And the problem is when the ship leaves port, that's it. Anything can happen. And if things don't go your way, you're shit out of luck. And so we ended up with one really bad deal that basically wiped out all of our profit. And that guy that I was partnered with ended up in jail because he ended up fabricating documents and doing all sorts of things with the people that he was trying to sell the sugar to that ended up being, affiliated with some Iraqi stuff. Thankfully, I wasn't involved with that trade, nor with him. I actually don't know what happened to him because he was quite old. So he's like, I don't know if he's still alive or not. Anyways, I'm back in Montreal because now I'm like, okay, this was too hard of a life experience to just assimilate. And I get a phone call from the Vietnamese people. And they're like, listen, we loved working with you. We're working on a project. We'd love you to fly in and just see if you can help us out. I'm like, what is it? They're like, no, you have to be here. I'm like, okay. I had a local partner in Vietnam. His name is Ken. And he was firecracker. Like this guy is all over the place, connected to everybody. And so I fly into Vietnam. I'm like, Ken, what is this about? He goes, listen, they're working on an airport and they're looking for people who have access to banks to help them finance it. They don't know how to do it. I'm like, well, I don't know how to do this. They're like, yeah, but you have the connections at the banks. They've seen you open up all these performance bonds. So they want you to be the conduit and the bridge to the banks and they want to pay you for it. I'm like, okay. So sit down and I'll show you pictures after of me, 27 years old. I had these loose fitting suits because now you're like in super formal territory, right? I don't speak Vietnamese. My partner's there translating for me. And I'm not particularly tall, but I'm like one of the tallest people in Vietnam. Like I'm not calling Vietnamese people short, but by proxy, I'm a little bit taller. And so I'm there and so I go to these super formal meetings, super formal settings, and you're in these government buildings, and they want to build. So Vietnam is a very long country. So Hanoi, the capital, is in the north, and then Ho Chi Minh City, which used to be Saigon, is in the south. But there's not much in the center. And because of its geographical location, it became a matter of national security for them to try and develop the center of the country so that if a tsunami were to hit or something, you don't have a big migration of population to one side or the other because they couldn't handle it. And so they wanted to develop this free trade zone area called Chu Lai. And their center point was going to be a commercial airport to compete against Kuala Lumpur and Hong Kong for all the cargo shipment and the FedEx and the DHL and all this stuff. So they wanted to borrow $1.5 billion. And somehow they thought that I could help them with that. I'm 27 years old. I've just lost most of my money in this trade. I'm like, sure, why not? What else am I going to do with my time? So I basically spent almost 4 or 5 months working with them on putting together feasibility studies, translating everything. And I got for them a letter of intent from Bear Stearns to help them finance this $1.5 billion airport that was going to be backed by a government bond. This was 2008. Lehman Brothers folds, Bear Stearns goes away, all the banking institutions go away. And so here I am, left with nothing after having spent months working on this with the government, flying back and forth. Whatever money they were supposed to pay me, they never paid me. So I'm now being financed by Mr. MasterCard and Mr. Visa. And so I'm back home in Montreal and I'm like, great. So basically I have nothing to show for the last 2 years out of all of this commodities trading, running around, gallivanting, da-da-da. And so I had to pay my bills. So I came back to Montreal. I actually looked for a job because I really needed the money. I wasn't going to freelance my way out of paying thousands and tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt. And so my friend from university approached me and he said he had just gotten a job with this company called Via One Technologies in New York City. And they were building the world's first roaming phone product that you could buy directly at an airport. So you would land at the airport, you would buy a phone with a SIM, with a phone number, 2 hours of talk time anywhere in the world for $80. Done. This is before roaming. Like roaming was still insane back then. And they had raised $75 million from Citibank. And they wanted someone to come and help them align business and technical strategies, someone who has traveled the world, who knows technology, who knows how to talk to people, knows all of this stuff. And so I ended up taking a mandate with them for about 7 months, 8 months. And Ashim, the CEO of the company at the time, went and bought 5 companies. One in Serbia, one in the Dominican Republic, one in Germany, one in Japan, one in Ireland. And it was my job to go across all of these different companies and try and align the business and technical strategy. Paid me really handsomely, paid off my debt. And then I was just honestly just tired. 7 months in, I was like, okay, I'm traveling every week. Not that the product wasn't getting anywhere, but it sort of like really wasn't getting anywhere. And yeah, I decided, you know what, like enough. It's time to like maybe just sit for a minute and do something more productive with my time and invest in me now and in something that's maybe not so volatile as commodities and take all the lessons learned from all of this gallivanting around and put it into something more concrete.
So you wrapped up that story. You're back in Montreal. You just you got paid for the phone gig.
Yeah.
Where are we at now?
Yeah. Now it's 2008. And I had been with your cousin for a few years. We were dating. And, it was time to tie the knot. So I got married. I got married in 2008. You came to my wedding. That was fun. And I needed to do something with my time that was now going to be about me investing in me, but me investing in me in a really material kind of way. So I started coming up and thought about ideas of things that I wanted to do. I had a couple of ideas of doing some stuff in real estate marketing. I thought that I could build a product. I actually built it. It was called SMS It, which was a real estate SMS platform so that when you are driving and you see a house that you like, instead of calling the agent, you can just SMS that number, the address, and it would give you all the base information that you want. Price, square footage, number of rooms, da-da-da. And then your phone number becomes a lead for the real estate agent. I came to learn very quickly that the real estate industry is like really hard to penetrate. Remax and all these big banners only allow a very small number of tech providers to engage with them or their agents. Otherwise, you're just trying to sell one-on-one, and I just didn't have the experience. Not only that, and this is something that you and I have spoken about, I just didn't, like, this wasn't my industry. Like, what was I know nothing about real estate. I actually know nothing about SMSs either, or digital marketing. So, it sort of didn't go anywhere. And then I did another thing with sort of telephony because I had just come from this world. So I just basically started creating ideas and just trying to see what would stick. I remember I would wake up in the morning, go on a domain name betting website or bidding website to see what domain names would be available, try and get an idea of the domain name and just try and build something. building software in 2008, 2009 was actually starting to become a lot easier. You now had these frameworks that would come with a bunch of boilerplate stuff that was built for you. So you're not sitting there building how to reset a password function. Like all this stuff is just out of the box available for you. So it became very easy to roll out ideas. Fast forward a little bit, I meet the same friend that brought me into that company in New York City. He had connected with another friend of his, Michael, who had a marketing agency. And that marketing agency was called Get Me Listed. He was selling paid advertising. If you remember, 2009 is when iPhone became really a thing, and Google Maps became the way that people started getting directions everywhere. And all of his paid ads client, who were mostly local businesses, kept calling him up and saying, can you get us listed on this Google Maps thing? Because people need to find us and we're not there. Realized very quickly that there was an opportunity to use this as a way of productizing building listings on Google Maps. He started selling it as an agency. It started to work really, really well. But also became really hard to manage because then they wanted to make changes to their listings. I want to change my phone number. I want to add images. I want to add directions. I want to add this and that. So he wanted to build some software to help him manage that. So I took on an engagement with him and my other friend Rav to go in and help build just software to help manage the requests coming in. Slowly it started to evolve into, hey, we're actually getting a fair bit of demand here. Meanwhile, 2008, 2009 is when the early stage investing in Montreal actually really took off. Real Ventures, which to me is the fund that I attribute real early stage investment in Montreal, like they are the reason early stage investing really happened in Montreal. They had just launched their first fund. It was 2009, 2010, I think. And I had been sort of staying connected to the tech scene in Montreal, and generally speaking, I was just interested in this whole investment thing. And so I told the guys on the digital marketing side, on the Get Me Listed side, to say, why don't we try and go and raise money? Like these guys just launched their fund. A friend of mine actually just got funded through them. Why don't we just go and pitch them? So we put together some shitty pitch deck, to be honest, and said, we want to take this agency and turn it as an agency as a service. We called it an AS. They thought it was funny, but it was dumb. But they're like, listen, we're looking for deals. You guys have some life experience. You've invested, or Michael at least had invested a bunch of his money into his agency. We had some revenue. So they wrote us a $300,000 check. That was the first seed round that we took for SweetIQ, or for what became SweetIQ. And so here we are, it's 2010, or it might be like late 2010. We have this agency idea to help local businesses get listed on Google Maps. And we have $300,000 in the bank. We started hiring. I actually had hired now the people in Egypt that I had hired previously. I rehired them to do some work for us. And we started doing this agency work. But we had never built product before. And to transition from an agency where you're just selling a service and picking up the phone to now actually productizing it and turning it into something that people click on is very hard. And so we just spun our wheels a lot. So I joined as the CTO of the company. It was my job to build technology. Michael was the CEO, and then Rav was the product officer. And we just really didn't know what we were doing. And this was the first time that I realized that when you take money from investors, my expectations was that they're going to help us way beyond just giving us the money. That wasn't the case at all. They completely left us alone. And now in hindsight, it was more my expectation that was wrong. Like, I'm not faulting them for not holding our hand. I just didn't know that that's what was going to happen. I thought we'd have people that would, like you would see almost in some of the shows, it'd be like brain tanks and like think tanks and like, let's ideate and like we're in the garage till 3:00. Like none of that stuff happened. It was me and my two partners and the check. And so we spun our wheels a lot. We tried to be something we weren't. We didn't know how to build product. I was getting really frustrated because I was building the things that my partners asked me to build, but then it wasn't gaining traction. And then I would get into shouting matches with my co-founder who was responsible for revenue. I'm like, I built the fucking thing. Where's the money? And then he would blame me not building it properly. And it was very chaotic. So we ended up bringing on advisors. That cost us a lot of money, a lot of equity. And these advisors were helpful, I guess. like they were okay for a little bit. But what ended up happening, as I've come to realize, is advisors inherently have a pull relationship. They wait on you to ask the question. They don't know what your problem area is. And so how could they help you? But then you're I'm a first-time founder. I don't know what the fucking question is. I don't know that something is supposed to be this way. I don't know that I'm not supposed to hire this type of role before that type of role. I don't know that I'm supposed to actually try and bring these types of user testing groups. Like, I don't know to ask these questions. And so they basically just sat there waiting for us to ask the questions. And we got some value when we actually knew what the question was, because now we had fallen flat on our faces 20 times, right? So anyways, fast forward, it's a year and a half into it. The thing is sort of working, but sort of not working. We were trying to initially sell to small businesses, but then they were like, we were selling like $75 a month package, and they're like, no, I'm not. Like, why would I keep paying you? And then we're like, okay, well, it's like $300 a year. Just like iterating and testing and failing, but without a clear strategy, right? So we just spun our wheels a lot. And then the having two co-founders is weird, because it's always 2 against 1 sort of thing. And we got to a point where I got really fed up of things not working. Our investors were starting to lose patience. We were starting to run out of money as well. And so we decided to make a switch in CEOs. And my other co-founder, Rav, decided to take on. And we started shifting in a different direction a little bit. And then a little bit under a year into it, things just didn't work out at all. And he decided to leave the company. And so I'm now I'm like, great, I've just invested 2 years of my life. I said I was going to go and do this thing. And I hadn't really given myself a reason as to why I was doing it. And that's why, it's part of the things that we talk about, like having the right intention and the mindset is really important. And so it was me and the other co-founder, Michael, who, had tried previously and wasn't able to get the traction that we were looking for. And I took over, I decided to pitch him and the board that, okay, well, I'm going to take over as CEO now. And so it was almost 2.5 years into the business. And I remember there was this investor who actually just wrote a post about him. His name is John Stokes, who's like the biggest hard ass in Montreal. And he's like, what is this? Like CEO musical chairs? Like, you guys are clowns. This is dumb. And I was like, listen, here's my vision for how I would do this differently. And I sat down and I explained to him and to the rest of the investors what I wanted to do and how we were going to do it. And they're like, okay, whatever, go. And so we were at the time, I think maybe doing, I don't know, $30,000 or $40,000 of monthly recurring revenue. Like, it was abysmal revenue. And I decided I was going to take a couple of big swings. And the first thing that I was going to do was I was going to learn how to, or re-fall in love with selling, because what I had learned through commodities trading is that I actually love to sell more than I love to build tech. And I remember we had this very long office, and I was sitting on one side of it with all the tech people building software. And then Michael, my co-founder, who was more sales, was on the other side. And I literally just picked up everything and I set up my office right in front of him. And I'm like, Michael, give me a list of phone numbers. Let's go. And I just started dialing. And I remember the first pitch that I made was so horrible. The guy stopped me like 30 seconds into the pitch. He goes, dude, slow down. I don't understand what you're saying. I don't even understand what you're selling, but whatever it is, I don't want it. And he hung up on me. And then, I started developing sort of the narrative of what I wanted to sell and how I wanted to sell it. And I started to realize, when you try and sell a really boring product, like, I'm trying to get you listed on Google Maps. And that sucks as a story. So what's a better story to that? Well, what does local marketing do? People are finding you on Google Maps. Well, if they're not finding you, they're going to competition mode. If they are finding you, then they're coming to your store. So instead of selling local listings, let's sell helping drive incentivized foot traffic to your store. If someone is looking up a product or service locally and they find your store and they click on, I want directions to your store, they're coming to your store, or at least a percentage of them are. So if I can sell you a story of the more that we do on the local marketing side, the more I can probably get foot traffic to your store, which therefore means more people are buying your products and services, that's a win. That was, for me, the beginnings of learning how to spin stories and why it's so important in today's day and age. And so I took over as CEO. I started to spin the story. I took a huge Hail Mary and I threw a big, big swing at trying to land Bell Canada as a client. I called in so many favors to land that deal. And that brought us up from, I think at the time we were maybe $30,000 or $40,000 in monthly recurring revenue to almost $100,000 in monthly recurring revenue. And that to me solidified that we knew that we had a good story and a good pitch, that going in to sell through marketing agencies versus selling direct, that's how we landed them, works better. And to my investors, they saw that, okay, this idea that I had was maybe onto something. So this was 2013, I think, that I took over. I grew that company 300% year over year from that point forward. Raised the Series A, got told no about 1 billion times. There's a very famous street in San Francisco called Sand Hill Road, where every single venture capital fund has an office. I think I went to every single one of their offices. And I was told no by almost every single one of them, mostly because we were in Montreal, mostly because I actually had no idea how to pitch and how to talk to investors well, but also because we had a huge competitor in the space, this company called Yext, that had started several years before us. They were based in New York City. They had raised way more money than us. And when we were at 100,000 in MRR, they were at 10 million in MRR already. Like they were just crushing it, right? And so I started pitching we're going to be a number 2. And most investors don't want to invest in a number 2, but some do. And so I came to learn that not all investors are built equally. And the way that you talk to them actually needs to be adapted. And the story that you tell and how you spin it and how you talk about your end goal and your ambition is what's going to dictate the outcome of whether or not you get financed. So I ended up finding a fund based out of Toronto that doesn't want the home runs. They want the singles and doubles all day long. I'm like, great. We raised, I think, a $4.5 million round. And that's all we needed. We took it, ran with it. I brought the business to a $10 million run rate. In 2015, we had heard that one of our competitors was going under. They had raised $16 million in financing, invested all in sales and marketing, barely had product to show for. So their clients were really pissed off, but they had a good book of business. And I found out that the CEO was Egyptian. So I used that Egyptian to Egyptian card to negotiate a deal with him. We bought almost $4 million of revenue for $900,000. Banger. So now my investors are looking at this stuff. They're like, holy shit, this is amazing, right?
This fucking guy.
Yeah, right? And now I found my feet. I'm like, you know what? I like doing this. I like being the CEO. I like being the most technical person in that room. I like that I can outsell, out-negotiate, outspin anybody. And I just got really, really good at it. And I remember I have a really good friend of mine today who used to work with me at work. His name is Steve, and he laughs still today because he was my best sales rep. And he was the guy that you'll walk into the room, everybody's his friend, everybody wants to go out and have a drink with him. And so that's how he does deals. He sells on personality. And he would bring me into the really important meetings and they would always bring a CTO or a CIO, and I would just run circles around them because I know the technical side very, very well. And obviously I can, outspin. And a couple of times I've been only a couple of times I've been called out because I've overspun a story, and they're like, you don't need to spin, but I would still continue spinning. I don't know. It became sort of like an art form for me, it became this fun little challenge, and I just really enjoyed it. So 2015, we buy this company. Now we're at 10 million in ARR. I'm trying to now raise a Series B. The problem is my big competitor at the time, Yext, is now filing to go public. They're at $100 million run rate, so I'm caught in no man's land. If they go public and they break out, I'm dead. If they go public and it tanks, I'm dead. So nobody really wants to touch this space either right now because they just don't know, right? If you already have a market leader, do we really want to invest in a number 2? And if we do invest in a number 2, how big can they really become, right? So I'm stuck. I'm being told no every day. Persevere, hustle through. Finally end up getting a term sheet from a fund out of New York City. And we're going through diligence. Everything is good. It's a pretty big round. I'm excited about it. But in my head, I'm also like, fuck, I've been in digital marketing now for 6 years. Do I really want to invest the next 5 years of my life selling listings? I don't like it, But I liked what I did, So I'm like, okay, fine. So we're going through diligence. And I had learned throughout my journey to always ask for a reference, no matter what. If I'm dealing with a client, ask for a reference. If you're dealing with a vendor, ask for a reference. If you're hiring someone, just ask for a reference, because I just want conversations to help me vet things. And so I asked the fund for a reference, and they introduced me to this company called ReachLocal. ReachLocal was a sort of a company that had software that was predominantly selling paid advertising, but just think of it like as a major agency player, but with a lot of software to optimize paid. And they were public, and then they went private, and they ended up getting acquired by Gannett, the owners of USA Today. $4 billion publicly traded company, like $4 billion in revenue, but publicly traded, like huge. And so they introduced me to ReachLocal because ReachLocal used Yext, and they wanted to vet how good we were. And so I got on a phone call with Sharon, the CEO, and I explained to her what we do. And she's like, oh, wow, okay, great. So you are a Yext replacement. I said, yeah. She goes, great, we hate them. I'm like, amazing. So we continue talking. I show her how we're different, the spin of our story, all the analytics that we have, why we win deals against them. And so she invites me to go and meet her and her team in Los Angeles. I'm like, okay, this is all part of the vetting process. I don't think about it too much. So I fly to LA, and I'm expecting to meet her. I walk into a room with her and 14 of her VPs and C-levels and everybody. And they grill me for an hour and a half. Every question, why this way, technology. I'm like, okay, this is not a, get to know me. This is a, how good is this guy? And so I hold my own, and I remember so it's her and her chief strategy officer. His name is Paris. And he asked me a question in the middle, like about halfway into the presentation. He goes, explain to me why someone who's so credible, who knows what the fuck he's talking about, who obviously has it all figured out, hasn't raised more money, isn't a bigger company. I said, I'm caught in no man's land. Here's our story. I'm in Montreal. Yext has done it before me. They raised too much money. Here's the reality of my world. And so he's like just everything was spot on, and I just held my own. And it was clear to me that he was going to be my internal champion. And so he's like, okay, let's go out for dinner. So we go out for dinner, we start building a rapport, and he's like, listen, I won't lie to you. Like, we've been thinking about getting into local for some time. We really hate Yext. You're the right size, the right shape, the right person to do this. How would you think about us acquiring you? And I honestly, sincerely hadn't, I thought about it a little bit, but not in a very concrete way until that moment. And so I said, listen, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. The good thing is, because we had just received the term sheet, we knew what the public market, or at least what the market valued us as. We had a valuation. And he knew that number because it was his former investor that gave it to us. And so anyways, we keep talking for some time, and I'm like sort of dragging my feet now with this VC because they want to close the deal. Meanwhile, I'm like, wait a second, there's maybe something here. And so the problem is, this is all happening, I think it was like November. And so it's the end of the year, nothing's going to happen in December. And so it's like, I don't know, December 10th or something. And that's when I talk about sparking your luck a little bit. Not that they weren't serious about making the acquisition, but it wasn't moving fast enough. And this VC is breathing down my neck saying, we got to close. What's taking so long? And I'm dragging my feet, sending them stuff and access to material. And we got lucky. One of their partners was not being very cooperative. And so it was timing was really interesting. And so I send I get a note from Sharon, the CEO, to ask me some stuff about the business. I'm like, hey, Sharon, listen, it's coming towards the end of the year. We need to decide if we're doing something, and if we are, then let's seriously do something about it. If not, then it's been great. Thank you very much. And I said, where are you now? She said, I'm in Dallas. I said, great, I'm in Dallas too. Let's have dinner tomorrow. She said, okay. I was sitting on my couch in Montreal, 11 p.m. Literally booked the first flight out, flew out to Dallas, went and met her for dinner, and we banged out all the details of the deal. And so that was, I think, December 10th. Holiday breaks. I come back from the holiday. It's January 4th. We get our letter of intent from them. I tell the VC, sorry, we're not going to do the deal. And we were sold by April, which is very, very fast timeline actually to sell a business.
Pause for a second. You good?
Yeah.
I want to jump into some quick fire stuff.
Yeah.
Short answers. It's a fucking beautiful story.
Dude.
We're Jesus fucking Christ.
Oh, it's a movie.
Yeah, my life
this
is
is a movie, man. There's a deeper story. This is why this is more than I was hoping for. And I'm going to be honest with you, Mo. We nailed the 30 videos. It was going to be fucking great. I'm not sure what this is, but I just wanted to do
Maybe
this.
in 5 years, you want to throw 20K at it, and you have people animate it.
Yeah.
Like a 20-minute show. Then you can totally do that.
Yeah.
You'll have the files.
Nice. Love it.
What would you look for, real quick here? I want quick things that come to your gut. What are you looking for? What are a couple of the skills you're looking for in a first-time founder?
Relentlessness above all. Above all, they need to have this absolute hunger and fire that no matter comes their way, they're going to break through that mountain. They're going to climb that wall. They're going to run through fire. Doesn't matter. They're going to figure it out. They're going to make it. And the second thing is actual insight. Like if you're going to go and solve a problem, solve it because you actually know what the problem is. Like I've been meeting founders the last few weeks that are trying to solve something they have no experience in. You know, like I met these two kids, I think, out of Turkey. They're both electrical engineers. They're trying to solve something in TikTok. Like, why? Like, you're not influencers. You know nothing about the space. Oh, we think. Okay, don't base it off of a thought. Have real insight. Have an unfair advantage.
Have an unfair advantage. Sure. Oh, fuck. That's great. Love that. What's the biggest punch in the mouth you've ever had as an entrepreneur? You didn't think you were getting back off the ground from?
So it changed. Well, I'll give you two, but it changed. But the first one was when I lost my senior most engineer at SweetIQ. I thought he was family. I mean, I still consider him as family, and I have come to learn over the years that you really can't take these things personal. I used to a lot. Like when someone quit on me, I'm like, what the fuck? No. When he left, his name was Steven. I thought it was the end of the business because he just knew the software better than anyone else, and I thought we would never be able to recover from his loss because he carried so much weight. And then we didn't die, and we were fine. That was for me the first learnings that no matter what you think the worst thing that's going to happen in your business, it will not be the end of you if you don't want it to be the end of you. You're going to make that happen or not. And then later on, it became failing on the strategy that took us over a year or two to execute. Like we set out a plan, and this is happening with my company today. We raised $55 million in financing. We had a very clear plan and a strategy. We executed it to a T. It did not work. And you would think, okay, we've burned through a lot of money. Investors maybe are not so happy right now. Not the end of the world. Shifted position, recalibrated, right-sized the team, explained to investors, we're fine. Like, so I tell founders to do this often. People talk about positive visualization. I want to be living on a beach. I like to do negative visualization. Everyone needs to do this. Think about the worst possible case that could happen. Your business could go to shits. You've lost all your money. Your personal relationships have gone nowhere. You wake up and it's Monday morning and you've lost everything. What are you going to do? And I promise you that no matter whatever you decide you're going to end up, that negative visualization is going to look like, you're going to be just fine. Like you have such skill and you live in the types of conditions where you're going to be able to stand on your feet within minutes. And when you realize that the worst version of the worst thing that could happen to you is not so bad, it allows you to start looking at risk in a completely different way.
Fucking love that. Fuck, that was so good. One piece of advice you can give a first-time founder walking into a VC pitch for the first time. One piece of advice.
Tell them your story. Just tell them your story. Don't go in there pitching. Like you're going to be stuffed up and if you're trying to deliver material, you're going to seize up and you're not going to be honest and true. Tell them your story. I moved to Montreal when I was 7 years old. The reason I'm building this is because I lost my identity and I really wanted to do something really cool. I don't know anything about digital marketing, but I know a lot about technology. I know how to build software. These guys had a really good idea. They had some proof points that listings was really key. I didn't know that it was a thing, but I knew how to write software. So I decided to jump in on them. We built something really interesting. Here are the results. Tell a story. Tell them your story. Nothing more. Whenever I give presentations and speeches and things like that, even when I do pitches, my number one objective is to nail the first 15 seconds. I try not to memorize anything. I try not to have cues. If I can nail the first 15 seconds of any presentation and I've engaged you, the rest will flow. That's the same thing with the pitch. Get their attention the first 15 seconds, the rest will go easy.
Okay, I need this in 45 seconds. I have a hypothesis. I have never been an entrepreneur. I have worked for people my whole life. I have an idea in a space I know. What are the top one or two things I need to think about to vet my hypothesis?
Yeah, go talk to potential customers first and foremost. If you have a really good idea, amazing, but that good idea might just be in your own head. Go and talk to who you think would be the economic buyer of this, the person that would put down their credit card or sign the check. That's number one. Number two, validate with the people who you need to build this thing that it is actually buildable and buildable in a way that will be scalable. We all think everything is feasible, mostly is, but not always. And the important reason behind this is because it'll tell you how long it's going to take to actually build it properly. Don't go to the yes people that will tell you, yes, it can be done. Go to the hard asses that will actually tell you it's going to be hard, it's going to be long, it's going to be difficult. Get that insight.
That's a wrap, boys.
Boom.